Thanks very much. I'm going to talk about the usethis package. And it's a package that has a whole bunch of convenience functions for your workflow. So it particularly is good for doing package development, but also has some things that are relevant for non-package projects and will help template projects, but especially if they're packages. It's pretty cognizant of various things we might want to configure in our R sessions all the time or in R Studio. And then more recently, it's become increasingly aware of Git and GitHub if that's also part of your workflow. So usethis has its own website that's down there on the left, and then the other short link on the right will take you to a GitHub repository, which you can totally trust, and get the slides for this talk and a few other links, and I'll show this again at the very end. So I want you to raise your hand if you've ever copied a description file or some other sort of metadata configuration type file from one package or project to the other. I certainly have done this, particularly with these sorts of files. You're not copying your R scripts so often from one to the other, but particularly these things that you need to do quite often. Well, not often enough that you remember how, but often enough that you want a nice way to do this. And these files are very particular in how they're written. And so we've all sort of absorbed the message that if you do copy-paste enough times in your R code, you're supposed to immediately have this bell go off in your head that it's time to write a function. And usethis is really taking that principle and applying it to our workflow. So if you copy files from one package to another often enough, maybe you should write an R function and use a proper template and create those files automatically. And so that is a very great deal of what's in the usethis package. And another reason that it's important to the group that I work in, I looked at the overlap between the 14,000 packages on CRAN and things that we look after in a very coarse way. So I looked at packages where the development happens on GitHub below these 5 GitHub organizations. So it gets the tidyverse group and the other people working on open source work at our studio and some friends of us. And that accounts for about 180 packages. And I looked at our activity over the past year, and on average, we release like 1.2 packages per day, per business day. So there's a lot of package development activity, and all of those things involve also doing full reverse dependency checks, and so we're often poking around in other people's packages to figure out why something we did changed something in their package, and like, is it our problem and we shouldn't do this, or we should help them fix it? And also in those repos, I see there have been 6,000 pull requests that have been open, closed, or updated over the past year. So there's just a high volume of activity for us that we'd like to automate. So the main clumps of functions in usethis there's 3 main functions to create things: create package, create project, which is a non-package project, and create from GitHub. And you'll see me demo these before the talk is over. And so these create packages and projects de novo. And then there's a giant list of use thingy functions that then incrementally add or modify the package, usually package or project once it exists. And so those just go on and on and on and on. And the next thing I want to talk about is the origin story for usethis. So about 5 years ago, Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow decided to end their marriage, but they portrayed it as a conscious uncoupling. And so that's where usethis came from. So the DevTools package was created by Hadley. At first, I think, went on to CRAN at 2011 as a package to help people write packages. And it grew and grew and grew because it turns out the things that you need there and that are convenient have really disparate functionality. So there's writing files and folders in a particular way, there's doing reverse dependency checks, there's simulating package build and install, and it became a bit of a monster. It's like difficult to maintain and difficult for anyone else to depend on. So the idea was to break it up. So DevTools still exists. I would describe it more as a meta package now, a little bit like tidyverse, but the mechanics are quite different. And so this is the set of smaller packages that either were already being called by DevTools or that were created, that were like excavated from DevTools. And so usethis is maybe took the large share of functionality, and it's the one you're most likely to work with directly, other than test that and Roxygen 2, which you may have already known about. And the fact that some of these don't have hex logos sort of indicates that they're meant more for sort of developer-facing things as opposed to like general population-facing. So we have some advice for how to use this in your own work. You can do it however you want, but this is what we do and would recommend. So if you're going to be a DevTools person, for interactive work, I would recommend actually attaching DevTools, either by calling library DevTools, or what I have is in my R profile, I have a little bit of code that will attach it every time I start R in an interactive session. And then I just call the functions directly: create package, document, load all. But if you're going to call these functions in a more programmatic way, in particular if you're going to qualify them with a namespace, now you really do need to figure out which package they come from. And so some people still like to work this way interactively, that's fine, but you probably do want to actually namespace them properly. And then particularly if you're going to use any of this in a package, it needs to be done like this. And we're hoping that DevTools doesn't really gain many more reverse dependencies and might actually lose them as people find the focused package that they actually need, and they can depend on something more slender. Okay, so I wanted to do live demos, and I was a little concerned about how that would work, so I actually made a movie for the first time ever. So yeah, if you want to, I will accept your help to get it started.
No problem. You're doing well.
So I've recorded 6 clips. That were sort of crowdsourced by things that people tend to do. I have a GitHub issue that's linked from the page I showed you earlier where people shared how they actually use this in their daily work. And so I used that to inspire myself to create some demos. So now I'm going to start this video and I just have to keep up and I'm going to narrate with what happens. So the first function I'm showing is what create package does. And I type painfully slowly in times here, but I didn't know how to speed that up. So we're just going to sit through it. So I'm creating a silly little package called Fluffy Bunny. And what you're going to see is you get a lot of information in your current R session about what's been created. And if you did that from within RStudio, it will launch a second session of RStudio and drop you into this new package. If you're not in RStudio, it will just switch your current R session. Here I'm adding version control to this package because that would normally be the first thing I do, which then like relaunches RStudio so that the Git pane is present. So now you're ready to start working. The first thing I'm going to do is finish my license. So I need to do a little bit of work in the description file and add another file that's augmenting that with my name and the year. And I can immediately pass our command check. So we're only about a minute into this video, and I have a functioning package that passes our command check. Since I'm maniacal about version control, I'm going to commit all of those things. And I think the next thing I do, I hope, is to fling this up on GitHub. And so there's a function in usethis called useGitHub, and it's one of a family of functions that does require you to have some things configured on your computer, like having a GitHub access token. And it creates a new repository on GitHub, pushes this package into it, takes me there into browser to celebrate my new success. And then if we go back to the package in RStudio, we'll also see that our description file has gained these standard links. Because a lot of people have their package source on GitHub or GitLab, but then they forget to put it in the URL field or to list the issues in a bug report. So it does that as well. And then the next thing I do is I'm going to install this package properly instead of just simulating that so that I can create an executable README. So when you have a package on GitHub, the README serves basically as your doormat. Sounds really unwelcoming, but it's your front door to your package. And you could put a little bit of code showing people what the package does. And so we programmatically, in many cases, create a README from an RMD document. And again, we can commit all of these things, push them to GitHub, and we'll see a nice looking repo. And I did not speed this up because I don't actually know how to do that in iMovie. So we've seen a 3-minute demo of creating a package properly licensed, passes our command check, is hooked up to a GitHub repository, and it has an executable README. So this is the kind of thing that we do often enough that we would like to make it super, super fast and super, super consistent. So that's create package. Now I'm going to show you create from GitHub, where someone else, Jim Hester in this case, has made us a dashboard where we inspect the health of our packages on CRAN and other places, and it has a GitHub source code link. So I'm going to go look at this package on GitHub, and I capture this little specification that is his username and the name of the GitHub repository, get it on my clipboard. So back in R, I can use create from GitHub and just drop that in. There's a ton of other arguments there, but that's what this configuration is about that I was telling you. I decide where I want it on my computer. And again, this will do both Git, GitHub, and local file system operations to go fork, clone that repository, pull it down, and open me in an RStudio instance ready to, in this case, you might want to make a pull request to someone else's package or like explore what's going on. And the nice thing is it sets up the remotes properly so you're in a position to pull upstream changes and to make a pull request. Pull requests are what we're talking about now. We've been encouraging a lot more pull requests in the Tidyverse. So I want to mention this one. Luke Johnston is fixing something for us, and Christophe Dervaux is a great community member who checks a lot of things in our repository. So if I want to look at whether I like this fix that Luke is proposing, we have made this function PR fetch. So this is a maintainer-facing operation where I can capture the number of this pull request. And over in the usethis package, my source package, I can fetch it. And I will literally check out a branch of what he's proposing. And it allows me to explore his pull request and not just rely on what I get from Travis, for example. And so I can go look at the changes he's made. And we've been encouraging a lot of pull requests, but that means you also have to be able to process a lot of pull requests. And so in this case, I wanted to make a few tweaks here and there, and I didn't want to go back and forth with him several times. And so since I've got this locally, I can make a few changes to this package. And so in this case, you're about to see that I made 4 more sort of incremental, fussy commits. On top of what Luke had done, I can push them into his pull request, and they'll show up in the branch of his fork, and then they will show up directly in the pull request. So that's what's happening here. And so it's a nice way to do just enough back and forth that the contributor does the heavy lifting, and then if you just want to change the styling or something of the code, it's nice to do it yourself. So my commits appear here now. He's still going to get the credit for the pull request. And so then the last thing we're going to do here is I wait until tests pass. I get this green check mark. I see that between what Luke did and what I did, we haven't broken anything. And I can squash and merge it on GitHub. So it brings his changes in and my changes, all of which will be attributed to him. And then back on the R side, I can use PR finish to conclude this little adventure that we had together. It'll switch me back to master, pull those changes in, and I'm ready to process the next pull request. And so it really makes it that you can take suggestions at the same speed that you're getting them. Let me pause here for a second. So this is the last demo, and it's the one that's least packagey, but this is going to speak to anyone who does a lot of teaching and you want to fling files on other people's computers. So did Colin have to leave? I hope he left, because there's no way he'll like this function. But so we often have this problem in workshops where you want everybody to have a certain set of files, and you faff around with people doing this for 30 minutes. So this function, useCourse, you point it at a zip file somewhere on the internet, and you ask people to trust you, and it will bring it down, unpack it in a sensible place, and delete the zip file with lots of questions along the way. So let's actually watch this. It has a less pedantic friend now, too. So we have to attach usethis, and then let's see where I don't remember what I download. I've made a fantastic course. Okay, so I'm pretending like I'm an instructor. Sorry. And this person, someone in my course, is agreeing to download the zip file and have it unpacked for them in a particular place on their computer. If it has an rproj file, it will also open in a new instance of RStudio. And so this is what the student might experience. You can give them our markdown files. How close am I on time?
Yeah.
We're good?
So we have like 2 minutes for.
Okay. No, and so this allows you to sort of transport files directly onto people's computer. It has a few formats in which you can give people the link, so that you can give a full ugly URL all the way to a zip file, which is easy to capture. In this case, on GitHub, people can always download a GitHub repository as a zip file. You can also capture links for Dropbox folders. So those are the two main ways that I tend to shove a bunch of files onto people's computers. You can put these things behind a short link, which is much nicer, because at some point a student is going to have to actually type this thing correctly. So, last slide. So now you have a sense of what usethis is, like where it came from. It's a piece of DevTools that got carved out and then developed a little bit further more recently, especially around RStudio, Git, and GitHub. And if you want to read more about the package, you can go to its website, or to get the slides for this talk, you can go to that other URL. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So we have time for one short question.
Okay, thanks, Jenny, for the presentation. One question I have is, it looks like usethis can be used to create new description files and or patch description files, but can it be used to, say if I have a package already and I didn't use this before, can I use to sort of patch all my existing files so that they get added, all these things get added into it?
Yeah, I think if I'm understanding you correctly, if you want to start taking dependencies on other packages, is that what you mean? Like put something in imports?
It's more things like your GitHub, when you do use GitHub, it adds the library, the URL into it.
Yeah, it will mutate your description file for sure, and multiple functions do that. Okay. I think usethis is best used in connection with version control so that you can immediately see what changes it made to your files. I think it would be a little terrifying to use it in a project that you don't have under version control. And it's getting that ability, the ability to read in and mutate description files and write them back out from the desk package, which you could also use directly if you know exactly what you want to do.